there, and welcome to Beaux-Arts Creative University's free ECD course. Today's lesson will be on personality development. Now, as children move through the preschool years, their personalities take on a clearer definition, and at the same time they become increasingly complex social beings. And yeah, in this slideshow, or rather video, we'll learn the many facets of personality and social development in a child, in an early child. As always, all links, resources and references will be put in the description below. And yeah, we hope that these lessons will provide parents or those interested with a more psychological understanding of children or of their children. I can also mention that I am in the process of writing a book on this topic, which will probably be released sometime in 2020. So, yes, my name is Vincent Lee Lloyd. My mother started a company when she was pregnant with me 22 years ago, and now I'm working for her. Beaux-Arts is an extramural company that specializes in developing whole brain creativity in children. You can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at that social handle, which is @BACreate. You can also check out our website, which is www.bacreate.com. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. Alright, so let's kick this off with emotions. Children's heightened cognitive and social development contributes towards changes in their emotional experiences. For example, basic emotions that appear during infancy, such as joy and sadness, become more varied. Self-development contributes to the development of self-conscious emotions such as guilt, shame, and pride. Children also become increasingly aware of their own as well as others' feelings. They also become more adept at controlling their emotions. The emotional development of children during early childhood will be explored in the following slides. Yeah, so let's first look at children's understanding of their emotions. Understanding their own emotions helps children to guide their behavior in social situations and to talk about their feelings. It enables them to control the way they express their emotions and to be sensitive to how others feel. Preschoolers' vocabulary for talking about emotions develops rapidly between 2 and 4 years of age. From the age of 4 to the age of 5, they are able to refer to causes, consequences, and behavioral signs of emotions. For example, he is happy because he is eating an ice cream. I mean, who isn't happy when they're eating ice cream? So, however, they are more likely to emphasize external factors over internal states as explanations, but this changes as they grow older. And preschoolers are also quite good at predicting what a friend expressing an emotion may do next. For example, 4-year-olds know that a happy child may share and that an angry child may hit someone. They are also capable of effective ways to reduce another's negative feelings, such as hugging a friend who is crying. Moreover, they become increasingly aware that thinking and feeling are interconnected. For example, that if a person is reminded of a previous sad experience, he or she may feel sad. Overall, preschoolers have an impressive ability to interpret, predict, and change others' feelings. At this stage, however, preschoolers still have difficulty in understanding conflicting emotions. That is, they do not understand that a person may predict two emotions at the same time. For example, being happy about a new bicycle, but feeling disappointed because it is the wrong color. This coincides with their cognitive ability to be able to focus on one aspect only. Apart from advances in cognitive processes, family relationships also influence emotional understanding. Preschoolers who experience secure attachment relationships tend to be advanced in their emotional understanding because such parents tend to engage in richer emotional conversations with their children. The more parents label emotions and explain them in talking to preschoolers, the more emotion words preschoolers use. Preschoolers who grow up in families that frequently talk about their feelings are better at judging emotions at a later stage. Knowledge of emotions help children in their efforts to get along with others. It is related to friendlier, considerate behavior and peer acceptance. Now, moving on to emotional expression and the basic emotions. As mentioned earlier, emotions and emotional expression become more varied and complex as children develop. So let us look at some of these emotions. Let's start off with happiness. By the end of the second year, babies are able to express themselves quite spontaneously. They will jump up and down, clap their hands, run, laugh out loud, and hug their loved ones to indicate their joy and excitement. During the course of the socialization process, however, children are taught to control their emotions. For example, children learn that they can be boisterous and spontaneous in some situations, such as at a birthday party or when playing games, but they must be controlled in others, such as at church or at the shopping center. Now moving on to fear and anxiety. Children's responses to fear and anxiety vary from being mildly timid to being paralyzed with terror. Not all children's fears are bad. Some fears help them to be aware of possible dangers and therefore provide a safeguard against harm and disaster. But now, what causes children to be afraid? Sudden, intense, and unknown stimuli confronting a child will produce a fear reaction. The cause of fear may either be the presence of something threatening or the absence of something that provides safety and security. Fear is influenced by context, individual differences in temperaments, and by experience. Many children's fears also parallel those of their parents. The intensity of fear, like those of other emotions, is influenced by biological factors based on individual differences, individual experiences, and socio-cultural contexts. Age and maturity also play a role. Younger children experience a great number of fears than older children. Younger children tend to fear animals, the dark, imaginary creatures, sudden intense stimuli, loud noises, and being separated from their parents. Situations that are likely to arouse fear in the first 5 years of life are noise, sudden change of illumination, sudden unexpected movements, the approach of an object, and heights. Similarly, unfamiliar people, objects, and places cause fear. Television programming may also induce fear. For example, research has shown that many of the real-world dangers children report worrying about are shown routinely on television news. These include physical injury, death, dangers associated with natural disasters, international conflict, or contracting infectious diseases. According to the research, repeated exposure to frightening content is likely to strengthen the cognitive structures that govern how children react to real threats and dangers. On this table, it gives an indication of expected fears at the different ages. Researchers have indicated exposure to negative information as the most prominent pathway to fear. They emphasize the need for proactively guiding the emotional development of children with emphasis on the recognition of and coping with the potentially debilitating effects of unnecessary anxiety and fears, which may ultimately affect their mental well-being as adults. So, how can parents and other caregivers help children to cope with their fears? Now, the following could be considered as guidelines. Children should be encouraged to talk about their fears. The feared object or situation could be neutralized by associating it with something positive. For example, fear of the dark could be overcome by playing pleasant and not scary games with the child in the dark. Children should see see other people handling the object or situation that they fear without fear. For instance, the child who fears dogs should be allowed to observe how other children play with dogs. The child could gradually, step by step, be brought into contact with the feared object or situation. Children could be taught certain skills to deal with the feared situation. A girl who fears the dark may be taught, for instance, to control the dark by turning on the light within reach of her bed. A cuddly toy could also be placed with her in her bed. By explaining the feared situation, certain fears may be overcome. The child who fears thunder may be less fearful if the reasons for this phenomenon are explained simply. Situations that could cause fear, such as hospitalization or starting nursery school, could become less fearful when the hospital or school is visited beforehand. In the event of a divorce, the parent should assure the child of their unconditional love and that he or she has no part whatsoever in the situation. Reasons for the divorce should be explained to the child, and if possible, contact should be maintained with both parents. Until they are old enough to distinguish between fantasy and reality, children who have irrational fears of monsters and other fantasy creatures should not be allowed to watch too many television programs or read books that contain this kind of material. Parents should provide a secure haven by dealing with their children's fears in a sympathetic, patient, and comforting manner. Now, what about frightening dreams in preschoolers? Estimates are that 10% to 50% of children from 3 to 5 years of age have severe nightmares that disturb their parents. Nightmares in children tend to reach a peak at the age of 10. After that, they decrease. However, young children with consistent bad dreams tend to be more anxious, emotionally disturbed, and have temperaments that are more difficult than children who do not consistently have bad dreams. Young children who develop chronic bad dreams may be similar to adult nightmare sufferers, for whom links with general distress and emotional psychopathology are well established. Carefully targeted treatment of early symptoms of anxiety, as well as promotion of early proactive protective parental practices, may help prevent the development of bad dreams, nightmares, and associated psychopathologies over the years. Now, let's talk about helping children go to bed. Psychologists have recommended that parents use the following steps in helping preschool children accept that they should go to bed. Establish an unrushed and regular bedtime routine. Allow about 20 minutes for 4 to 7 quiet activities such as quiet conversation, reading a story, or singing. Do not allow a child to watch scary television programs. Avoid active or highly stimulating play just before bedtime. Keep a soft nightlight switched on if it makes a child feel more comfortable. Remain calm, but do not yield to impulsive requests such as "just one more story" or "I just want to go and drink some water." A favorite blanket or special toy such as a teddy bear are soothing objects and are comforting to the child. Many children resist going to bed without these objects. If you are trying to break a habit, offer the preschooler rewards for good bedtime behavior, for example by praising him or her. Do not send the preschooler to bed too early. This is a common reason why sleep problems occur. If the child's fear of going to sleep early persists, try to involve the preschooler in a program that will help the child to learn how to relax, substitute frightening thoughts for pleasant ones, and deal with stressful situations. In many cultures and families, children share the parents' room or bed for the majority of the early childhood years. This may help alleviate some of the fears and discomforts. Moving on to anger. Anger refers to a strong emotional reaction that is primarily socially instigated, often under conditions of threat or frustration. Early reactions may be caused by objections to routines, such as dressing, eating, or sleeping, conflict with parents over authority, disagreement with peers over possession of toys, and physical discomfort. General responses to anger in young children are aggression, outbursts, or active resistance to reasonable requests. The negativity, stubbornness, resistance, and temper tantrums of 2 to 3-year-olds, also called the terrible twos, are well known. As children grow older, there is a shift from unreserved violent reactions to more subdued and controlled responses. By the time children reach school age, many have learned to control overt reactions to anger. Children learn to control anger through the process of socialization. This implies that there will be cultural variations in how children deal with anger. For example, in certain cultures, child rearing practices include promoting interdependency, concern for others, and subtle expression of emotions. These children respond to interpersonal conflict with sadness and fear, and pro-social behavior. On the other hand, in other cultures, child rearing strategies are characterized by independence, self-actualization, assertiveness, and the open expression of emotions. These children will typically respond more aggressively, assertively, and overtly in conflict situations. Experts agree that angry feelings in children need to be recognized just as we recognize them in ourselves as adults. To keep children's angry feelings from erupting into harmful actions, these feelings need to be acknowledged, while the child has to be taught how to deal with them effectively. In addition, limits need to be set for angry acts. Consider the following example. I know you are angry with Tommy for breaking your toy. Now this is acknowledging feeling. But I cannot allow you to hit him. Now this sets the limits. And then you carry on by saying, let's see if we can fix it. This is setting an example for appropriate action. The child should learn that although angry feelings are natural, certain feelings such as hitting other children or parents, being cruel to animals, and destroying property are not permitted. Yeah, so moving on to emotional expression involving the self. By their second year, children begin to show emotions that reflect a more complex understanding of the self and social relationships. Self-conscious emotions, these are feelings that involve injury or enhancement of their self-sense, such as embarrassment, shame, guilt, envy, and pride, develop as children's self-concepts become better defined. These emotions also require an understanding of the perspective of another person. For example, that the person may be disappointed with the child, may be hurt, or may feel affection for a third party. Self-conscious emotions start to emerge before the second year of life. At about 18 months, children indicate a feeling of shame and embarrassment for lowering their heads, lowering their eyes, or covering their faces with their hands. At 2 years, children show signs of jealousy. For instance, they might wedge themselves between their parents as they are hugging each other. Guilt and pride emerge approximately at the age of 3. Children at this age can also show remorse and try to correct a wrongful act. For example, Faisal will try to clean the wall on which he has just scribbled with his crayons, or Veronica will try to comfort a friend whom she has just bullied. At this age, self-conscious emotions become increasingly linked to self-evaluation. Children can now evaluate their own thoughts, plans, desires, and behavior against what is considered socially acceptable. This means that self-conscious emotions may serve as a guideline for children's behavior. For example, a child may avoid behavior that could cause negative emotions and repeat behaviors that are pleasant. Complex emotions therefore play an important role in children's performance-related behavior. For example, they may experience pride after having accomplished a task well and will most likely repeat such a behavior. Complex emotions also play an important role in children's moral behavior. For example, they may feel guilty after transgression and decide to avoid such behavior in future. Moving on to emotional expression involving others. Another complex emotion that often emerges during early childhood is empathy. As mentioned earlier, empathy refers to a person's understanding of another's situation and feelings. The development of empathy is related to a child's developing self-awareness, language, and cognitive skills. This means that not only do children become increasingly aware of another situation, but they are also able to verbalize their concern. For example, during an extremely cold winter when one of the authors was exceptionally cold of a certain book, her 3-year-old son remarked, "Never mind, Mommy, when I'm big I'll buy you a nice warm coat." Parenting styles also play a role in the development of empathy. Parents who are warm, encouraging, and empathetic towards their children usually have children who are empathetic towards others. Cold, punitive parenting styles, usually characteristic of abusive parents, hamper children's development of empathy. Thus, children often seem to act towards others as their parents act towards them. The ability to regulate emotions is one of extreme importance in the child's social development. Babies cry or laugh easily when they find stimuli either pleasant or unpleasant, because they do not yet experience embarrassment. They do not mind crying in front of others. However, children in early childhood are more reserved, partly due to socialization and partly due to developing strategies to control emotions. Now, these strategies will be discussed. Firstly, avoidance strategies. Due to their increasing mobility and improvement in social and cognitive development, preschoolers learn avoidance strategies. These are, in other words, to avoid situations that lead to negative emotions. For example, Peter puts his bike in the garage because he will feel unhappy if it gets stolen. They also blunt emotions by restricting sensory input. For example, by closing their eyes or ears when they hear or see something unpleasant, such as monsters on TV or hear thunder. Older children use language strategies. For example, Susan comforts herself by telling herself that mommy will be home shortly. And cognitive strategies. Clive tries not to think about his lost dog, to control negative emotions. Another strategy is called masking. Masking basically means pretending an emotional state. For example, Tabu will fall and hurt his leg, but pretend that it does not hurt, since crying in front of his friends will be embarrassing. This masking of emotions is related to display rules. Display rules are cultural guidelines for when, how, and to what degree emotions are displayed. Children therefore learn behavior prescribed by culture. For example, according to Western and Oriental culture, you should smile even when accepting a gift you do not like. Children will also learn behavior that could be a means to an end. For example, Ezekiel may smile although he feels ill, otherwise his mother will not let him go to a friend's birthday party. Children improving their language skills and the increasing knowledge of emotions contribute towards controlling their own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. Soon after learning to talk, preschoolers start using language to describe their emotions. They also develop skills to interpret, to predict, and to change others' emotions. For example, in interpreting, which is they would comfort a sad friend. To predict, for example, if a child thinks if I do not pack away my toys, Daddy will be angry. And to change others' emotions, an example would be giving mommy a kiss to win her favor after misbehaving. These skills and knowledge are of the utmost importance in a child's attempt to get along with peers and adults. In recent research, children have knowledge regarding which situations causes which emotions. For example, being nasty to a peer causes sadness. Are able to modulate their emotions and show more positive emotionality, are more popular with others. The reason for this could be that children who have knowledge about emotions are able to react more appropriately towards their peers' emotions. Parents can play an important role in helping young children regulate their emotions. For example, by the way that they talk to them, especially with regard to negative emotions such as anger, frustration, and sadness. Parents who have an emotion coaching approach monitor the children's emotions, view their negative emotions as opportunities for teaching, assist them in labeling emotions, and coach them how to deal effectively with emotions. They interact with their children in a less rejecting way, nurture them, and use scaffolding to help them regulate their emotions. In contrast, parents who have an emotion dismissing approach view their role as one to deny, ignore, or change negative emotions. Children of such parents generally show poorer regulation of emotions, less focused attention, and more behavior problems than children of emotion coaching. The self-concept is an important aspect of personality development, as it includes the person's view of him or herself. We also note that development of the self-concept starts with the development of self-awareness during the first year of life. This development continues during early childhood and includes self-esteem and gender and ethnic identity. The self-concept refers to a person's view of him or herself. Towards the end of infancy, children can recognize themselves, for example, in a mirror, and give basic descriptions of themselves. For example, I am a boy, I have brown hair and brown eyes. Preschoolers' knowledge about themselves expands increasingly, which enables them to give more than physical descriptions. Children in the early childhood years establish a categorical self, meaning that they can describe themselves in terms of their name, gender, age, skills, and possessions, where they live, and who they are friends with. For instance, Martin will be able to state his name, that he lives with his parents in Pretoria, that Bandile is his friend, and that he can ride a bicycle. We thus see that children in the early childhood years can describe themselves in terms of external observable attributes or characteristics. But can they describe their inner internal self, that is, psychological aspects such as emotions and attitudes? By the age of 3.5, preschoolers are able to describe themselves in typical emotions and attitudes such as I am happy when I play with my dog, or Sam was cross with me today. This suggests that they have some awareness of their own physical characteristics. Their developing understanding of personality traits is also indicated by the correct reference of motives. For example, they know that a shy child may not want to play. However, children in the early childhood years do not refer directly to psychological traits. For example, I am a friendly, helpful person when they describe themselves. This capacity only develops with further cognitive development. Young children's self-concepts seem to be closely related to their possessions. This is especially notable in their assertiveness over ownership of objects. Think of how two preschoolers may fight over a toy. These struggles over objects and assertion over ownership should, however, not be interpreted as a negative sign of selfishness. In fact, researchers believe this should be regarded as a positive sign of children's developing self-definition, that they are learning to define boundaries between themselves and others. Developmental psychologists also believe that this ability to Developmental psychologists also believe that this ability to differentiate the self from others underlies the ability to cooperate in, for example, the settling of disputes, the solving of simple problems, and the playing of games. These abilities of young children may be utilized by adults to promote a positive peer interaction. A parent, teacher, or caregiver can, for example, acknowledge the child's possessiveness as a sign of self-definition by saying, "Yes, I know that is your toy," while at the same time encouraging positive interaction by saying, "But can you give someone else a turn?" rather than simply demanding that the child shares. Okay, so moving on to self-esteem. While the self-concept is an individual's view of himself or herself, for example, my name is Margaret, I have blue eyes and I can ride a bicycle, a person's self-esteem is the personal evaluation of his or her characteristics. Individual self-esteem and self-concept are positive when they evaluate their characteristics as good and acceptable, and negative when they are dissatisfied with their characteristics. The degree of self-acceptance plays an important role in children's personality development and influences all aspects of their development. Children with a negative self-concept usually have high anxiety levels and later display poor school performance and social adjustment. Children with a positive self-concept, on the other hand, are usually more successfully academically, have more self-confidence, and are socially better adjusted. Self-esteem is generally based on, firstly, the degree to which the individual feels that he or she receives love, acceptance, support, and encouragement from others. Secondly, the specific characteristics and skills a person has. And thirdly, the degree to which the person accepts the various aspects of the self, especially when comparing the self to others. The development of self-esteem begins in early childhood. As children develop, they form numerous perceptions of themselves. They start to interact with others and draw comparisons between themselves and others. Preschoolers' self-esteem, however, is not as clearly defined as that of older children and adults. They are inclined to consider themselves in terms of social acceptance, such as people like me, and skills. I can do things. Preschoolers also do not realize that they have different competencies in different activities, such as I can ride my bike well, but I can't run fast. This ability to differentiate develops usually only after 7 years of age. In fact, preschoolers will indicate that they can do everything well. In reality, this is not the case. Therefore, preschoolers generally have high self-esteem. This high self-esteem has an adaptational function. Because preschoolers have to master a variety of new skills, their positive self-esteem with the accompanied self-confidence contributes towards their development of initiative. We have mentioned that an individual's self-esteem also develops through comparison with others in order to evaluate him or herself. Preschoolers, however, do not seem to evaluate themselves, as they believe they can do everything well. This does not mean that they do not watch others and make comparisons. These comparisons, however, do not have an evaluative function, but rather a social function. For example, to be sociable, look, we have the same sandwiches, we are twins, is something that they might say. Or to obtain information. Mary might look at Fatima's drawing to see what color she has made the tree. However, preschoolers feel indignant when they think they have been wronged. For example, if they believe that a brother or sister has received more sweets than they have. In fact, children's sense of fairness develops fairly early. Now, here's a question. Do children in cultures define their self-acceptance in terms of their individual skills and social acceptance? Now, there was research done into two types of societies, an individualistic culture and a communal or collectivist culture. Now, this could also be a Western versus an African society. In the individualistic society, preference is given to personal goods, self-reliance, independence, and creativity in child-rearing practices. In the communal society, individual goals are subordinate to collective or community goals. Therefore, child-rearing styles emphasize interdependence, obedience, and conformity. This means that individualistic societies will value individual skills more in their defining of the self-concept. Communal societies, on the other hand, will consider social acceptance, living in harmony with others, and subordination to the wishes of others as important attributes of the self. It is therefore clear that the culture in which children grow up will determine which aspect of the self-concept will be emphasized. Okay, so moving on to gender. Now, in most cultures, a person's gender plays an important role in defining his or her self-concept. Already at or even before birth, the first question usually is it a boy or a girl? Throughout our lives, we remain aware of ourselves as male or female. This also influences how others react towards us and how we act. Initially, it was believed that boys and girls are very different and even opposite personality characteristics. Today, we know that there are few psychological differences between boys and girls and that males and females seem to be more alike than different. The only notable differences that have been empirically verified are that boys are more aggressive than girls, boys have better visual spatial skills than girls, and girls are better at decoding social messages from non-verbal cues. In fact, many characteristics that we believe are attributed to male or female gender differences are actually gender stereotypes. Girls are not more talkative, emotional, or dependent than boys. Boys are not more logical, nor do they show higher achievement motivation than girls. However, gender stereotypes seem to persist and may still be noticed in the roles that males and females are expected to perform. Now, why do these gender stereotypes persevere? The answer might lie in our gender role development. So, next week we will discuss the processes involved in gender role development, as well as the theories for gender role development. Gender role development. The term gender role refers to the behavior patterns and attitudes that are viewed as appropriate or typical for male or female of a specific society. Gender role development therefore implies the development of these behavior patterns and attitudes. Gender role development includes three processes: the acquisition of a gender identity, the development of gender stereotypes, and the development of gender-typed behavior patterns. So, let's start off with gender identity. In other words, children's knowledge of themselves as male or female is a critical milestone in the development of gender roles. Most children between the ages of 2.5 and 3 years can label themselves correctly as a boy or a girl, although they do not yet have a concept of gender constancy. Gender constancy is, in other words, that a person's biological gender remains unchanged, irrespective of superficial changes. For example, many 3 to 5-year-olds think that boys can become mothers and girls fathers if they want to, or if Betty cuts her hair and wears trousers instead of a dress, she becomes a boy. Only between the ages of 5 and 7 years do children realize that a person's gender remains constant. Children thus enter the school phase with a stable identity as a boy or a girl. As soon as preschoolers identify themselves as boys or girls, they also become aware of gender stereotypes. For example, preschoolers can identify toys, clothing, tools, household items, games, careers, and colors, especially pink and blue, as linked to a specific gender. Gender stereotypes become stronger as a child grows older, especially after age 6, when gender constancy has been formed. Moreover, children regard gender stereotypes as absolute rules. For example, a boy cannot be a ballet dancer and a girl cannot be a soccer player. However, these absolutist assumptions fade with the onset of adolescence. Children display the typical behavior of their gender at a very young age. This is called gender-typed behavior. Children also show a preference for playmates of the same sex. These preferences become more apparent during middle childhood, when children show increasing gender segregation and boys and girls form separate groups. So theories of gender role development. Some psychologists emphasize the role of biological factors in the differences between the sexes, while others believe that social environment has a major impact. Some believe that children's cognitive development plays a role in the gender role development. Let's start off with biological theories. Biological differences between the sexes begin at conception when the XX chromosome combination develops into a female and the XY chromosome combination develops into a male individual. Not only do the chromosomes play a role, but hormones in the bloodstream before or about the time of birth may affect the developing brain and influence of gender differences. The male hormone testosterone seems to be related to aggressiveness, competitiveness, and dominance, and could be a reason why males are more aggressive than females. Another example comes from the studies of children in whom hormonal imbalances occur during prenatal development. Female fetuses that received an excess of androgens or male hormones prenatally were born with XX genetic combination, but with male-like genitals, a condition called androgenital syndrome, or AGS. A number of these androgen girls' genitals were surgically corrected and they were raised as girls. In follow-up studies, these researchers found that these androgen girls showed more male personality characteristics than their sisters or other girls. For example, they preferred male or typical male activities to female activities, and they showed better visual spatial abilities than other girls did. Perhaps the most dramatic example of biologically based contributions to gender is hermaphroditism. That is, infants born with ambiguous sexual organs, part male and part female, or accidental damage to their sexual organs. Such children are assigned as early as possible to a gender, usually with surgical intervention, that holds the potential for the most normal functioning and stable gender identity. In one case where 27 male children were born without penises, 25 were raised as girls. However, in childhood these girls engaged in rough and tumble play and considered themselves boys. In another dramatic case, a 7-month-old boy's penis was accidentally cut off during circumcision. It was decided to raise him as a girl and he received surgical reconstruction. Although initially he seemed to develop into a normal girl, the child later rejected the female identity and at puberty switched to living as a male. After another surgical reconstruction turning him back into male, he married a woman and adopted her child. These cases seem to make a strong point for the biological basis of gender behavior. Yeah, so moving on to the psychoanalytical theory of Sigmund Freud. The psychoanalytic theory of Sigmund Freud indicates biological factors and the social environment as determining influences on the child's gender role development. Biological factors are sexual energy that is channeled to the various zones of the body during the course of development, and social environment is the way in which the child is treated by the parents. So according to Freud, gender role development begins during the phallic phase, 3 or 6 years of age, of psychosexual development. During this stage, the child experiences a biologically based love for the parent of the opposite sex, the Oedipus complex in boys and the Electra complex in girls. However, the child experiences conflict and anxiety as a result of these forbidden wishes, and in an attempt to resolve the conflict, he or she identifies with the parents of the same gender. According to Freud, therefore, gender role development begins because of the child's identification with the same gender parents. This means that a child takes on the characteristics of the same gender parent. This process occurs mainly on the unconscious level and is therefore not under the control of either the parent or the child. Freud also believed that should the mother or father be inappropriate models, the children will not acquire appropriate gender roles. By inappropriate models, he meant that the father is often absent or not dominant enough, or the mother is not feminine enough. So Freud's explanation for the development of gender roles did not receive much empirical support because of the following shortcomings. Firstly, according to the identification process, which Freud argues is the major mechanism in the development of gender roles, children will have the same characteristics as their parents. This is not necessarily true. For example, many feminine boys have very masculine fathers. Secondly, children are so ignorant of human anatomy at this stage that it is difficult to believe that they could experience castration anxiety or penis envy, which is the basis from which the identification process is supposed to develop. And thirdly, Freud stated that children's identification with the parent of the same gender develops out of fear of that parent. Most modern researchers believe that identification develops from a warm, supporting relationship with the parent. Moving on to social influences. Some theorists believe that the social environment serves as the major influence in determining a person's gender role. According to social learning theory, children learn gender roles in 2 ways. Firstly, through differential reinforcement, and secondly, through observation and modeling or imitation of behavior. Differential reinforcement. And this means that children are encouraged in and rewarded for gender appropriate behavior and punished for gender inappropriate behavior. Think, for example, of a mother who says, "Look how nicely Jane is playing with her doll," or a father's remark, "John, a big boy like you doesn't cry." This also implies that boys and girls are treated differently. This differential behavior of parents is apparent even at their child's birth. Baby boys are often dressed in blue and girls in pink. Several studies have indicated that parents often attribute certain characteristics to their babies. Parents see daughters as smaller, slighter, softer, and less alert than sons. Fathers see greater gender differences than mothers, regarding their baby sons as stronger and hardier than their baby girls. In some studies, however, adults who do not know the gender of the baby could not see the differences. As boys and girls grow older, they are not only regarded as different, but they are treated more differently. Parents' differential treatment typically includes gender-typed play and T-sets. These activities are responsible for the well-defined ideas children develop regarding male and female behavior. Possibly, these activities are also responsible for the fact that boys and girls differ in aggression, in visual spatial skills, and the ability to interpret social cues. In fact, parents who hold the most traditional views regarding gender roles encourage clear, definite, gender-typed behavior in their children. These children may also distinguish between males and females at much earlier age than other children may. It also seems that fathers in particular play an important role in their sons' and daughters' acquisition of gender-typed behavior. Fathers are more inclined to reinforce typically masculine behavior in their sons and typically feminine behavior in their daughters. Mothers are more inclined to treat their children similarly. Other adults, and especially the peer group, also contribute towards children's gender role development and play an important role in the reinforcing gender-typed behavior. In fact, boys receive the most negative reaction when they overstep their gender boundaries. Girls who, for example, want to build things rather than play with dolls will be considered tomboys, but boys who prefer to play with dolls rather than blocks will be ridiculed and even rejected. Now, moving on to observation and modeling. According to the social learning theory, children also learn gender roles through observation and modeling. Children see which toys and activities are for girls and for boys and begin to imitate individuals of their own gender. Children are exposed to a number of models not only at home but also in the world outside and in the media. When only women do the housework and cooking, children will assume that brooms, mops, pots, pans are for women. When only men go to work in the garden and fix a car, children will regard this as a man's work. Only when parents share these activities do children form less stereotypical ideas. It seems also that children, and girls in particular, form less stereotyped ideas regarding family roles, careers, and even toys when the mothers work. Their parents, such as family members or family friends, may serve as role models for children to imitate, especially if they are found fond of them and seek their approval. Nursery school teachers also influence children's gender-typed behavior. For example, if the teacher models and reinforces mixed gender play and activities, the rate of this behavior also increases among the children. Children also acquire gender roles from the media such as television, movies, magazines, children's books, and even school readers. Although the media is currently more sensitive towards gender roles than 20 years ago, stereotypes are still rife. Male characters in movies or television shows are still largely portrayed as independent, dominant, active, innovative, and decisive, while female characters are usually nurturing, dependent, and passive. An example is the advertisements on television. Although women are sometimes portrayed as corporate executives and men sometimes in nurturing roles, the stereotypical roles are largely maintained. How often are men used to advertise margarine or washing powder, and how often are women used to advertise a specific car or beer? In fact, some American research has indicated that children who watch a lot of television are more likely to develop stereotypical attitudes regarding masculinity and femininity than their classmates who watch less television. The social learning theory offers a good explanation for the acquisition of gender-appropriate behavior through the process of modeling and reinforcement. However, the assumption is made that children are passive recipients of external influences. Parents, peers, television characters, and others portray gender-appropriate behavior and reinforce the imitation of this behavior. This viewpoint does not consider children's own input into their gender role development. The cognitive perspective, however, addresses this aspect. Now, according to cultural theorists, the child's developing cognitive skills are important in gender role development. Cognitive theories focus mainly on the ways in which children understand male and female gender roles, and on their view of themselves as male or female. Two theories will be discussed: the cognitive developmental theory and the gender schema theory. The cognitive development theory. Now, this was initially proposed by Lawrence Kohlberg. According to this theory, children's gender typing develops after they have acquired a concept of gender. As soon as they are consistently typify themselves as male or female, they organize their world based on gender. This means that they actively acquire knowledge regarding gender-appropriate behavior from models of the same gender and sources of information. Thus, the following happens. An example would be a child's thinking, I am a girl, therefore I will do everything in my power to find out how to behave like a girl. According to social learning theory and psychoanalytic theory, the sequence is just the opposite. It would be, I am treated like a girl, therefore I am a girl. Kohlberg's theory therefore rests on two assumptions. First, gender role development is independent on cognitive development. Secondly, children are actively involved in their own socialization. They are not passive recipients of social influences. According to Kohlberg, children progress through 3 developmental stages in which they should acquire specific knowledge before they can develop an understanding of what it means to be male or female. It's gender identity, gender stability, and gender constancy. Gender identity. In other words, children's knowledge of themselves as male or female. This develops approximately at the age of 3. Next is gender stability. In other words, the knowledge that gender identity remains stable over time. In other words, boys eventually become men and girls women. This develops after children have established a gender identity at approximately 4 years of age. And finally, gender constancy. In other words, the knowledge that a person's gender also remains stable across situation. This develops at the ages of 5 to 7. Children now realize that a person's gender is unchangeable, and the concept of gender is therefore established. Kohlberg's theory is criticized, however, for the assumption that gender constancy should be attained before children seek information regarding gender-appropriate behavior from role models of the same gender. It seems that children already have certain stereotypes regarding gender-appropriate behavior long before this time. They also start paying attention to and showing preference for models of the same gender, as well as gender-appropriate behavior at a much earlier age than indicated by Kohlberg. This means that children need only a basic knowledge of gender to acquire gender preferences and stereotypes. Alright, so the gender schema theory. It's similar to Kohlberg's cognitive development theory, in which it emphasizes the importance of the development of a gender identity and children's intrinsic motivation to act in a gender-typical way. This is reached by children actively seeking knowledge regarding values, attitudes, and activities related to their view of a specific gender. This means that they actually socialize themselves. According to researchers, this self-socialization begins when children develop a basic gender identity at approximately 2 to 3 years of age, and not, as Kohlberg proposed, at 5 to 7 years when gender constancy is achieved. Thereafter, in an attempt to organize their social world, they develop 2 gender schemas. A gender schema is a cognitive structure that organizes the social world into male and female. First, children develop same gender and opposite gender schema. This is relatively simple cognitive structure in which children classify appropriate behavior for boys and girls, and so girls would play with dolls and boys would play with cars. Secondly, they develop an own gender schema. This is a more elaborate cognitive schema that includes own gender behavior and serves as a basis for guidelines for gender appropriate behavior. Thus, although both boys and girls know that boys fix cars, boys will be motivated to obtain knowledge about this, but not girls. The researchers behind this point out that although children's gender schemas are powerful mechanisms for organizing their social world, gender schemas may also cause distortion of information that does not fit into the schema. For example, the researchers have shown that the researchers did show pictures to 5 and 6-year-olds depicting children performing gender-appropriate activities. such as a girl playing with a doll, and then also show gender inappropriate activities, for example, a girl fixing a car. A week later, children could easily remember the gender of the person who performed the gender appropriate activities. However, the gender of the persons who performed the gender inappropriate activities was distorted. For example, children would say a boy was fixing the car. This research provides some explanation for the persistence of stereotypes. For example, children who believe that only men can be doctors and then meet a female doctor will say that they met a nurse and will maintain their belief that women cannot be doctors. These children have thus distorted information to fit into their cognitive schemas. Cognitive theories provide a satisfactory explanation of how children's own knowledge contributes towards their gender role development. These theories also provide the best explanation why children distort information that is inconsistent with their ideas of gender-appropriate behavior. Each of the above-mentioned theories or previously mentioned theories provide some insight into the development of gender roles. The biological viewpoint stresses genetic and biochemical influences. The psychoanalytic theories stress the interaction between biological and social forces. The social learning theory points towards influences from the social environment, and the cognitive theories indicate the importance of cognitive development and the individual's own input. Although each theory highlights an important facet of gender role development, no theory can provide an adequate explanation on its own. And so the last part of this, which is racial and ethnic identity. We have already established that cultural context plays an important role in the early development of infants and young children, influencing all aspects of their development. We have also indicated that children's development is understood best through everyday cultural practices, the interactions and multiple relationships that develop within the ecological development niches. Although researchers are increasingly incorporating culture as a variable into their research, limited attention has been paid to race and ethnicity as concepts in child development. These concepts can be defined as follows. The term race is a social-political construct and is used to describe observable differences in individuals, such as in their skin color or other visible physical differences. The term ethnicity is used to describe one's cultural background, which is typically associated with a specific language group. For example, in the South African context, a South African child may belong to the black racial group and to the Sotho ethnic group, or to the white racial group and the English ethnic group. As we have seen in our discussions on the infant and preschool child, children become aware of their surroundings at a very early age, which very likely include their cultural context. For example, cultural values may underlie how soon a mother responds after an infant cries, where an infant sleeps, how he or she is carried, or when and how much he or she is fed. Parents may also sing a song or tell a story or refer to a child's observable features such as hair, skin, or eye color that speak to the child's race or ethnicity. For the young child who closely observes behaviors, the transmission of culture, ethnicity, and race is a critical component of his or her gathering of information. It can be assumed that the formation of racial self-concept and ethnic identity also develops along with other development of the self-identity, and gender identity. Children's ethnic identity develops according to 5 components. This can be seen on the screen. Ethnic knowledge, ethnic self-identification, ethnic constancy, ethnic role behaviors, and ethnic feelings and preferences. So, ethnic knowledge refers to children's knowledge that their ethnic group has certain distinguishing characteristics such as behaviors, physical traits, values, customs, and language that set them apart from other groups. Ethnic self-identification reflects children's categorization of themselves as members of their ethnic group. Ethnic constancy concerns children's understanding that the distinguishing characteristics of their ethnic group do not change across time and place, and they will always be members of their ethnic group. Ethnic role behaviors include children's engagement in the behaviors that reflect the characteristics of their ethnic group. Ethnic feelings and preferences refer to the to a child's feelings about belonging to their ethnic group and its members, and their preferences for the characteristics that distinguish their group. Ethnic identity develops gradually during childhood. Preschoolers do not really understand the significance of an ethnic group and do not understand that ethnicity is a lasting feature of self. Although they may label themselves as white, black, brown, Indian, or that they speak English, Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, or Afrikaans, for example. Although they may engage in behaviors that characterize their ethnic group and may have some knowledge of their group, they do not understand that ethnicity is a lasting feature of self. For example, the white boy who says that he would like to be black one day so that he can also build beautiful houses. Or the black girl who says that she would like to be white one day so that she could have long blonde hair. Children also begin to identify themselves according to their ethnic group between the ages of 5 and 8, and shortly thereafter begin to understand that their race or ethnicity is an unchanging feature of themselves. The family and larger social environment play a major role in the development of children's ethnic identity. Parents, family members, and other adults can be instrumental in teaching children the strengths and unique features of their ethnic culture and in instilling ethnic pride within them. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for listening for, what's this now, already an hour. If you have any questions about any of the topics covered, please send me an email, or if you have any suggestions as well, also please do send me an email as well. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you have a fantastic day further.